Welcome to the Clean Industry Podcast. This podcast is brought to you by Hycamite, a company that produces clean hydrogen and solid carbon by splitting methane. In this podcast, we explore the technologies and innovations that shape the future of industrial decarbonization. This episode is a part of a series called Hydrogen 101, and in this series, we break down the fundamentals of hydrogen, what it is, how it's produced, and how it can be used. I'm Sonja, I'm your host, and my co-host, Matti Malkamäki, is a long-time energy entrepreneur, a visionary in clean tech, and a leading voice in Europe's hydrogen economy. Welcome back to the podcast, Matti.
Thank you.
So it's 8 a.m. here in Kokkola Industrial Park when we're recording this podcast. And I feel like in a lot of places in the world, it's quite early to be at the office.
Correct.
At 8 a.m. Do you feel like it's early for you, or do you usually show up even earlier?
A lot earlier. So we are here. I mean, there's some of us at Hycamite that typically come to 7, some even, for 6. And I rather be here early in the morning. I mean, that's like the winning hours of the day, so that you can do something, you can focus on something, and you can read some emails. And of course, because we have partners and shareholders in Japan, then they are already, ahead of us. And there's usually quite a lot of emails or some communication that you need to do towards that direction. So yeah, I tend to be awake early.
Yeah, a lot of us start at 7 o'clock.
Correct.
Already. I usually get a head start at home. That's where I read my emails in the morning. I have quite an extensive morning routine. I wouldn't say it's one of those healthy ones with ice baths and that kind of stuff that you see on social media, but it's quite extensive. What does your morning routine look like?
Dull, I think. Just shower, wash, put clothes on and get to the work. I don't eat breakfast at home. I just, start the morning with a coffee because I usually don't feel hungry. And then my first, when I eat first is about the lunchtime. So, yeah.
And what's the first thing you do when you get to the office?
I put the coffee machine on.
Yeah, that's a good way to start.
That's the first thing. So that the moment that I open the door, I usually just walk to the coffee machine, and then that's it.
All right, good. Okay, enough about morning routines. I want to get to the actual topic of today's podcast. So the podcast is called Hydrogen 101. And in the last episode, we talked about all the different colors of hydrogen. And now we're going to do a bit of a deep dive into all of these colors one by one to know how they work and what the issues are around those production methods and so on. So today we are diving into 2 of the most widely used and debated hydrogen production methods. We're going to talk about gray and blue hydrogen. Both of these are fossil-based, but one claims to be cleaner. And I want to find out how. So gray hydrogen is the most common type of hydrogen produced today. And that's made from natural gas. Specifically, it's made by something that's called steam methane reforming. Matti, since you're the expert, could you explain how that works?
Glad to. So steam methane reforming is, as the name says, you have steam and you have methane, and then you reform the hydrogen, by using those. So that's it's a little bit difficult to explain in a podcast, but practically you have a reformer where you have some catalysts, and then you have hot temperature that you're getting by making the steam and then having the methane in the same place, so that you are actually forming the hydrogen partly from the steam and partly from the methane, and then you are producing a lot of CO2 emissions as well there. So typically steam methane reformers have about, roughly speaking, 10 kilos of CO2 equivalent per kilo of hydrogen. So that is quite high emissions that you have from that.
And today, steam methane reforming accounts for around 95% of all hydrogen production. So consider that the emissions are somewhere between 9 to 12 kilograms of CO2 per kilogram of hydrogen. That seems like a lot.
It is a lot. So the mankind at the moment is producing annually about 100 million tons of hydrogen. So that means that you have a gigaton of CO2 emissions just from this steam methane reforming annually. And that is not a small amount. I haven't done actually a comparison that how much that would be when you compare that to, a country or something like that, but it's meaningful amount.
Yeah. So we're producing a fuel that's supposed to fight climate change by emitting all of this CO2. Why do you think that gray hydrogen has dominated for so long if these are the emissions?
Well, the problem is that the mankind doesn't or has not paid any so to say, effort or impact on the atmosphere. So we are using the atmosphere as a landfill site, so that no one has really cared about those CO2 emissions. And if you have like SMR, the steam methane reforming it's the most energy efficient way of producing hydrogen. So that's how you go. I mean, you have the least use of fossil fuels, and you have the most energy efficient way and cost effective way to produce hydrogen, but you have very high emissions to the atmosphere. And as no one has really paid any attention to those emissions, this is where we are. But now, luckily, we are starting to pay attention, and actually the decarbonization of industries is getting more and more interested, and there's also financial benefit of those because like here in Europe we have the emissions trading scheme and so forth, so that companies are seeing that they actually need to reduce their emissions, and otherwise they get some penalty payments and this kind of stuff. So now when the atmosphere cannot be regarded as a landfill site anymore, as a free landfill site anymore, then of course we need to change.
So you mentioned that there are penalties for emissions, at least here in Europe. Are there any incentives to phase out SMR?
Well, those emissions payments are like the incentive. But when we are talking to our customers, we also see that actually the customers of our customers are willing to, choose such producers that are having less emissions and so forth. So they are really, using this as a fighting scheme. I mean, in competition, that who gets the deals. So that if you have a less emission rich or less carbon footprint in your product, then you are usually the one that is given like a benefit if the price is about the same.
Yeah. So we've considered gray hydrogen, which is SMR, and then blue hydrogen would be quite similar. It's the same production method, but it adds carbon capture and storage, also known as CCS. So it sounds cleaner, but I'd like to know, what is the status of CCS today? How much cleaner is it actually?
Well, that depends. So perhaps first of all, we discussed that how this capture and sequestration can be done. So if we start from there for the benefit of the audience. So when you have these emissions coming from the SMR sites, in older ones, you might have these emissions coming from perhaps, two different ways. And in the newer one, you have a little bit different kind of system so that it is easier to capture the CO2. But how it usually works is that you have some sort of chemical fluid amines or something like this, that in this amine cycling, you are actually capturing the CO2 from the exhaust stack. And that means that you can then have this CO2 so that you can compress it into liquid form, or you can put it in a pipeline system or something like that one, that you are able to really store it somewhere. And the sequestration, I mean, the storing part is so that you try to find locations that you put it underground or under the seabed and so forth. And you need to have this different kind of storage locations. There are some that have now been developed. For example, in Texas, in California, they have there's something that they're developing in Canada and so forth. North Sea in Europe is also something that where this kind of sequestration projects are ongoing.
Okay.
But those are not everywhere, and it is so that in those locations where you have it, it also adds cost because you need to have this additional infrastructure and you need to have the OPEX cost so that you are compressing the CO2 under the seabed, for example, and that makes the blue hydrogen, yes, on the other hand, less emitting, but on the other hand, more costly. But you also ask that, okay, how does this affect? That can you take all of them, all of this?
Yeah,
this
how
CO2?
much cleaner is it?
So it depends that how much you can have or capture from the process based on that, how old, for example, the design of the SMR is, that where the CO2 is coming out and so forth. In the newer ones, what we have heard, so that about 95% can be captured, so that there's still like 5 to 10% that will be released to the skies. But in the older ones, it can be as low as only 50 to 60% or something like that one. There are projects where they are really aiming now for even more than 95% capture rate. But I'm not too sure that how price effective or cost effective they are.
So about the CO2 and how it's used after it's been captured, you mentioned that it is permanently stored somewhere. Does it have any other applications?
Yes, that kind of capturing is called CCUS. So it's a carbon capturing and utilization and sequestration. So you can put it so that there's projects like, for example, here in Finland, or I've met some companies in USA as well, where they are actually putting that in a concrete and making that concrete then more stable and so forth, because it calcinates there. But I think that also those projects are rarely new, and the amount that how much you can actually do it there, and whether there escapes some CO2, that is something that where these companies are still, well, they still have work to do in that sense, that they can demonstrate that, okay, if we have X amount of CO2, then which part of that one can be regarded as safely stored into the concrete.
Okay. And you also mentioned that the infrastructure for CCS is would be expensive. It requires some extra infrastructure.
Correct.
How much does that affect the price of the hydrogen?
We have done a lot of price compressions in our company for this, and we have heard from customers that what it is. But you can say that if not doubling the price of the hydrogen, but almost, so 1.5 times more expensive. That is something that we have heard from large sequestration plants and so forth. But the smaller the site, the more costly it will be.
Yeah. How much of a premium do you think customers would be willing to pay for hydrogen with lower emissions?
Well, this is a good question. I have relatively long background in this industry, and I'm nowadays thinking it directly that way, that there's no customer that is willing to pay ESG premium anymore. So that we have had this, for example, in the early days of hydrogen hype, if you will, there were discussions that, okay, because of less emissions, then the customers really can pay like double the price or even 5 times the price because there's no emissions and so forth. I don't believe in that. I think that how it is that when you have the existing competition, and when you have, for example, oil and gas companies, so that they are making their products, or chemical industries making their products, they need to fight on international markets towards every single other company that is working there. And if you have somebody that has, 1.5 times, 2 times more expensive product, but less emissions, there are only very, very, very few customers that are willing to pay for it, because it is so, harsh, the competition. And I think that you should start thinking it a little bit other way, so that you need to be competitive on the existing price levels, and you can gain more market if you are emitting less. So that's how it should be. I don't know where actually somebody would really benefit from having hydrogen that is 2 times more expensive than the gray hydrogen, for example, even though that it would have no emissions at all. I mean, those are very, very rare cases.
Are there currently many projects around the world for blue hydrogen that you know?
There are some. So that there are. I was actually at Climate Week a couple of weeks ago in New York, and I met there somebody from California, where they claimed that, okay, now we have the class 5 kind of a sequestration site, and we will start using that one, and then the blue hydrogen is like the future. Then I have seen projects in as I mentioned, in Texas and in those southern states of USA. Then also, as mentioned, in North Sea and on the Gulf area at Persian Gulf there. So there are some, but they are like focused on some very large industrial sites, and then that's where you have it.
All right. So for a while, I want to go back to the role of blue hydrogen. Do you think it is a bridge for scaling up other types of hydrogen production methods, such as green hydrogen, or what is the role of blue hydrogen?
I think that it's twofolded, the role. So first of all, the industry has to show that, okay, we can cut these emissions and we are doing something, because the regulation is pushing them so, and the industry has to show that we are willing to do it as well. So therefore, you need to do something. And as that technology is known and used, it's mature already. So it is like, let's start with this. So that is like the first part of the role, so that, okay, we can show that, yes, there's happening something and we do care. But on the other hand, the difficulties on the blue hydrogen, I mean, the cost and where it can be utilized and in which way, so that it has to be like a newer SMRs, and it has to be on relatively large sites, so that it becomes more cost effective, and so that means that it cannot be applied everywhere. However, I do think it that way, that these so-called low carbon hydrogen production methods, ours included, are really needed in order to push the renewable hydrogen methods and very low carbon hydrogen methods forward. So that problem with the green hydrogen, as we know, is that it's very volatile in terms of production, and industry cannot be based on volatile production of the feedstock. No. So therefore, the blue hydrogen, as being low carbon hydrogen method, but steady, stable like that one, it can be used as a base hydrogen, if you will, so that it is actually put on the pipelines, and then you can add this more volatile production on top of that one. So the blue hydrogen also is not, I don't think that it fights against green hydrogen. It may enable it.
So you'd see it as a combination of several different technologies.
Correct. Yes.
If we want to decarbonize industry.
I do. I mean, there's no silver bullet.
Yeah.
Absolutely no.
Good. I think that is a good point to end this week's podcast at. Next time, we will be talking about green hydrogen that's produced by electrolysis. Are you looking forward to that conversation?
Of course. Always. Pleasure to be here.
Great. Well, thank you for joining me today for the Clean Industry Podcast and Hydrogen 101. And I will see you next time.